Once again, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. Continuing the podcast on this series on recognizing God's omnipotence, I want to touch on something that should be obvious to all of us, but really, I want to kind of highlight it anyhow. It's really that without God, science can get pretty ridiculous. Now, again, I'm a software engineer, and I believe that now that this whole thing has come to this intrinsic intelligence that I'll be talking about, I'm very logical. I'm all about logic. I question everything. But sometimes I also recognize that because we can't explain it today does not mean that it isn't. Right? It's like gravity, right? Long before we knew about, the forces that constitute gravity and the acceleration due to gravity and all terminal velocity and all this kind of stuff, we knew there was gravity. Well, it's the same thing I see happening. Now I spend a lot of time, I do watch a lot of these nature shows and all of that stuff. And this is where I realize, especially with naturalists. So we had this big split. Religion went one way with the creation, and now we have the prophet worship, basically, and coming back, this will all tie back together when we recognize that nature is the manifestation of God's omnipotence, and intrinsic intelligence is proof of God. Because what we see is, again, I'll speak for somebody with my software background, the idea of a program written, so you have a series of complex programs. It's kind of like we'll do with our AI. We'll put different AI in drones and cars and refrigerators and cameras and everything, war machines, all these things. We put different programs. But what we don't do is we don't have to worry about things like procreation. And if we look, we will see that every creature, every living thing, there is a portion of the program that's about procreation. This is why everything, you see animals go crazy and they fight to the death and all of this stuff, because there's a part of the program. This is intelligence. They know at a certain time, this is what, my whole focus, my entire focus. Some of them won't even eat food. The entire focus is directed to procreation, continuing the species. That's, when you think about it, whenever decisions have to be made, again, to be a good decision maker, we have to get all this knowledge and then make decisions based on, and so there has to be knowledge, there has to be an intelligence. But where science can get really silly is like, I've watched these things, you can go out there and you can find it, where people talk about, dolphins, and I actually heard this. Dolphins evolved from a wolf-like creature that used to visit the ocean, and somehow that animal basically took its nose and moved it on top of its head. This is a kind of this is total madness, and you hear this stuff, you hear things like all of these animals, it seems like the animals themselves have this ability. No, we don't have it. Somehow we lost that ability to manipulate, because I like to think of from the creator's standpoint, where if you built DNA, you knew every gene, you knew every configuration. Well, every species is like a different configuration. And I talk about, you can see that the creator, with each configuration species, embedded also an intelligent program. That's the intrinsic intelligence that enables them to survive. So they know what to eat. They don't just go, pecking on birds and just go eating all kinds. They know this, I eat this and this. And now, if you look at that thing that I'm actually recommending now in the Mind of Plants video, we can start seeing that even plants have that intelligence that they are using things like to get to pollination and to procreate again. They put a lot of energy into that, into attracting the right animals, whether it's to eat, a large animal to eat the whole fruit and then disperse the seeds, in their feces, or for actual pollination with bees and birds and all of these things. You see intelligence there. All symbiosis that we see, between different animals in nature, you see the intelligence. Like when you see there's a flower that needs a special bird, and it puts on a bird, and then the bird goes. For instance, there is that hummingbird where it has an extra long beak that it uses to and only certain flowers. So they have that dependency. We see all of this in nature. Some of the ridiculous stuff that you hear it, and it's just as when the world was flat, the earth was flat. We just accept it. Like you see these poison frogs with attitude. They don't hide from anybody, and it's as if, well, the animals ate them. Well, no, if they ate them, they died. They are not passing that on. So there is that knowledge. The frog knows, I don't need to hide. The other animals know, I know, don't mess with that. It's the same thing, like there is that beautiful little octopus, the ones with that pulses the blue light, and they all know, don't mess with that. Because they have blue fishes, they eat them. But this thing, when they start pulsing, they're like, oh. Normally, it's kind of like, they have the thing with trunks. You put a light and a flash and they look towards it. You would think that animals would be attracted. But they know. This is the sort of thing. And these naturalists and scientists, they do great work. But it's the little gap, that little gap where you see intelligence. You see that intelligence, like the bird that locks in another bird in a tree and knows when to go back. That is signs of intelligence. We look at, again, bees making honeycombs. Or everywhere we go, even with plants, you see the intelligence. This is the entrance. But when you hear, naturalists, scientists researching this, because they don't want to attribute that to that intelligence which we observe. And again, logically, we know that intelligence that's so pervasive across every species cannot just appear, spontaneously. Random stuff would just give you random stuff. And it's not as if the intelligence it's only in ants. Like the weaver ants, and they know how to glue things together, or a spider, spinning different kinds of webs. Some of them that fly off with a web, and they use it to attract different things in different ways. Like the corolla spider doesn't just put a web, it uses threads to sense, vibration, all these things. So they all show intelligence. But when our scientists see that, they cannot say, oh, they do not recognize that intrinsic intelligence as being proof of God. They're like, no, that just somehow spontaneously happened, or the animal over time. Now, these animals don't have a written, it's not like us, where we have a written and an oral tradition, where we pass it down and we accumulate knowledge. They don't have that. But somehow you hear these absolutely ridiculous statements that, this spider over time just decided. The spider decided. You hear trees making decisions, right? You see, it's like those animals that change colors in winter. Those animals somehow decide it's about time to change colors. Think about it. Think about that. Here we the way we are born, that's it. We are, with all our processing, we can decide, that I want to get taller. I would love to have, again, those eyes where I can see in the dark. I'm amazed at that. Those animals that see, like a lion, cats and all that stuff. I would love to do that. But it sounds simple on the surface, but think about the genetic modifications that are required. Can any plant or animal make that decision? We look at things like bats, right? And one of the interesting things to me, again, as I meditate and try to seek answers, is that it comes back down to, with man, these things may not be possible. With God, all things are possible. So when we as we are wont to do, we love to do, I know that. So we say, well, a fish should be shaped like this with certain types of fins, and then we look and we say, oh no, there's fish like this, fish with eyes on top, fish, some of them don't have eyes. Then you get into echolocation and all this type of stuff. So this is the sort of thing that shows the majesty of the Creator. And in each one of them, there is this intelligence that they know. You think dolphins or bats, bats can see, but in the darkness, you think the bats engineered themselves? Think about what has to be done to their DNA, so that the part of the brain that has to be developed, the part of the brain and the physiological changes that has to happen so that they can emit those low frequency sounds or high frequency sounds and all of that stuff. All of that has to be done. And then they have to understand with the confidence that I can do this. It's kind of like us just jumping in the ocean and saying, I can breathe underwater. I know that I can hold my breath for, whales that can hold their breath for hours. And we see all of these things, and they know it. They know that they can go, I think whatever the records that we observe, that these animals can do these things. They know that. They have that intrinsic intelligence that they don't have to. It's kind of like our immune system, right? The more we discover about our world, the more we recognize there is this intrinsic intelligence that we don't have to think about. It just enables us to do certain things. But when you listen with naturalists and scientists, with all their wonderful intelligence, they totally ignore the fact that there is an intelligence that pervades every species. All of these actions, and you hear the most ridiculous things, like this animal decided this tree decided this, and you're like, really? And you see even between species, interspecies interactions, this plant decided that I wanted to attract this bird, so the plant, and I'm like, really? Do you understand what has to go into the DNA to change that? Do you understand how the different intelligence where it can actually change itself? Obviously, that's impossible, because it takes a lot of thinking and then re-engineering, not just on the surface, because these things have to propagate from generation to generation. So it has to happen somewhere down at the DNA level, which controls or directs the physical characteristics of all living things. This is where the changes happen. And so, as with evolution, what we see is there are, again, programs written. That's the intrinsic intelligence that enables it to react. And this goes with free will. Our machines, at some point, we'll have to go in and upgrade the program, right? Over the air or whatever, we have to go and push a new version of the software. But when it's been designed over billions of years, it's like, no. Yes, there's that part about procreation, so they all go crazy about that, because that's important, essential. But you see, the other parts of the program that have been, they're so well defined, so well implemented in these permanent memory of all these animals. And I'm not talking about the learned stuff. I'm talking about, a worm knowing, with how to navigate. The blind animals, all the birds, things that change, and estivation and hibernation and all of these things, birds and fish and all these things that navigate without GPS. Like one of the amazing things I was telling someone recently, we think even with GPS, we can navigate now and we can set a home and get back there, right? We have that happening now. Just think, let me give you an example, and you will hear how kind of ridiculous science will look at this when you don't recognize the intelligence that goes into making these things. It's like now we've used so much pesticides. There are many places where they don't have enough pollinators, and so in the bee industry, you can have truckloads of beehives that they truck around the place. Simply enough, we do it, and again, like so many things in nature, the manifestation of God's omnipotence, we don't even think about it. But think about this. The bee, now let's say wherever the queen bee is, right, that becomes home. Today, that bee is, let's say, somewhere in Northern California. And so you truck it up there. I don't know how long it stays up there, but that bee has to set. This is home. Because I have a friend who has, pigeons, and he talks about how great they are. I said, but the bees even do a better job because home can change. So they have to reset home and go out the mile or 2 miles or however far they go and do their pollination and get back. Then within some time, they take them, put them on a truck, take them someplace else. They have to reset that GPS again. This is home. So based on where the queen is and those pheromones and all that stuff, they have to reset their GPS to that geographic location. That is home. And they function very well. Think about that. If one of us were to be moved around like that, and we say, okay, you just go out there 2 or 3 miles and get back, right? And then I'll move you again and you get back. And we don't have GPS? Good luck. This is the kind of sophisticated engineering, I use a term, right? Sophisticated software engineering that has been built into intrinsic programs. And when you hear these naturalists and scientists, again, the intent is not to denigrate, but it's to recognize the gap. And to fill that gap, they come up with the most ridiculous reasons, like this bird decided this. The ptarmigan decided to change its colors. All these animals that live in cold places, and when the weather changes, the seasons change, they decide to change their clothes. The animals decide that. Think about what has to happen within that animal. This is not going and just like me, just take the shirt off, put on something else. No. That's happening somewhere in their DNA. Along with the DNA, there's a program that says, now you start shedding this. You need to shed this and push out a new, different color. This is not just, this is intelligence. And when you listen to naturalists and scientists, when they don't want to recognize the Creator, and this wonderful intrinsic intelligence that He has embedded in each and every one of us. Like I said, even our immune system, we want a lot of things that we're not aware of. It's happening. The programs are already there and they're running, right? The program is already running. From the time you were born, that program was already there. That program is running. You look at any animal or plant, any living thing. And some people are even speculating that even the non-living, like the planets, the movement even of the planets, and plate tectonics and all of these things, as people who we don't know, but we have to be open. But there are some times when it is evident all around us, the intelligence that is evident in every living thing. Look at that documentary. I loved it. In the mind of plants, you will see that they're recognizing that yes, there is memory, because you have to have memory to implant information. And so there is a memory where, like us, we learn things, but there's a part that we don't have to learn. Like I said, our immune system, we don't have to learn anything. It knows what to do. That intelligence is already written into that memory, right? So listen to this, and even all the forces around us, when that gap between recognizing God's intelligence embedded into every living thing, science jumps that gap by making silly, really ridiculous statements about the animal, the plant. They made the decision. They decided to do all of this. When we know, even with our superior intelligence, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do it today. We could not manipulate the genes to make a plant, change based on seasons. We don't know how to do that. We could not, modify anything in a bird to make it change color based on the seasons. We could not do that. It is beyond us. But yet we say, oh, that bird decides that. This animal, this fox, this goat, they decided that. They gave up this so that they can. So, and you will see that constant ridiculousness that today, and it's accepted. It's funny, I think, when you just accept things, but that's not good. Not everybody, question these things when they seem, patently, obviously ridiculous. That this animal, this plant, this thing made a decision to do this, right? So it's something I wanted to bring up so that we start recognizing in every living thing, every living species can be considered a DNA configuration, and along with the DNA which dictates the physical characteristics, there is intrinsic intelligence that is evident. Like I said, the thing about procreation, look how every species goes that way, right? You see, animals will fight to the death. We see all of these things where now they're finding out that there are some animals that can use medicinal herbs, etc. Right? We see these things. This is all the product of that intrinsic intelligence. Our Creator embedded that in us. And we need to recognize that and stop being so silly about and totally ridiculous attributing things to, capabilities to plants and animals that are patently obvious and obviously wrong. To attribute a sort of intelligence and capabilities to them, that they can modify themselves. Okay? So, once again, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to review, any and all of these videos. And remember, as we go out there, and it's not, there is no coincidence here. You made a series of decisions that led you down this path, so that we can bring this world together to recognize the omnipotence of our Creator. And this, unlike worshipping our own prophets and looking at stories written by man, nature will bring us all together because it's universal. The Creator did not intend for us to be as divided by religions. He shows us in this recognition of nature that universal methods for all of us to get together with His diversity. Diversity is His. As servants, we honor that diversity, and we recognize we are all under from the same Creator, because that program that's within us, those intrinsic intelligent programs are within each and every one of us in a very, very common way. Okay? So again, thank you for taking the time, and until next time, may God bless us all. Thanks again.